The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. 400 species sent their representatives here to debate, negotiate, and occasionally threaten each other. Lights of every color floated through the air, each one representing a different world's preferred illumination. The sounds of 1,000 languages mixed together into a constant hum that never stopped, day or night. Ambassador Sarah Chen had served humanity in this chamber for 15 years. She knew every corridor, every back room, and every secret passage where deals were made away from public eyes. She knew which species could be trusted and which ones smiled while they planned betrayal. Most importantly, she knew that humanity's position in this vast political machine was exactly where they wanted it to be. Middle of the pack. Unremarkable. Safe. 300 years ago, when humanity first reached the stars and discovered they were not alone, their ancestors had made a choice. They looked at the galaxy and saw empires built on conquests, species that measured worth in military strength, and civilizations that had forgotten what peace even meant. They saw what humanity could become if they followed that path, and they chose differently. The genetic modifications came first. Voluntary changes that softened the aggressive impulses written into human DNA by millions of years of evolution. The warrior traditions were preserved in museums and history books, celebrated as heritage but no longer practiced. The weapons were built, tested, and then locked away in vaults that most humans did not even know existed. Humanity became traders, educators, diplomats. They made themselves useful without making themselves threatening. They smiled at insults and walked away from fights. And slowly, over 3 centuries, the galaxy forgot what humans had once been. Sarah Chen sometimes wondered if humanity had forgotten too. She stood now at her designated platform, watching the 3 great powers of the Council conduct their usual theater. The Velthari hegemony controlled nearly 8,000 systems. Their representatives were tall, reptilian creatures with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 50,000 years and expected to rule it for 50,000 more. The crystalline collective was harder to understand. Silicon-based life forms that existed as a hive mind, they rarely spoke but voted with perfect unity. Their technology was the most advanced in known space, and they shared none of it. Then there were the Dromath. Sarah watched their delegation with the careful attention she gave to all dangerous things. Insectoid creatures standing 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and mandibles that could crush steel. They had built their syndicate through conquest and maintained it through fear. They were not subtle, but they were effective. Today's session concerned trade routes through the Velthari crystalline border region. Sarah had no stake in the outcome. She was here only to observe and report. Humanity's 12 systems were far from this particular dispute. The session ended without resolution, as most sessions did. Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave when a junior aide rushed to her platform. The young man's face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Ambassador, we just received word from New Eden." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. New Eden was humanity's crown jewel, a garden world that had been terraformed into paradise over 2 centuries. 300 million people called it home. What happened? The aide could barely speak the words. The Dromath, they attacked during the Harvest Festival. 3 cities are gone. Just gone. They took people, Ambassador. Hundreds of thousands of people. Sarah Chen had trained herself to remain calm in any situation. That training held now, even as something ancient and terrible began to wake in the deepest part of her mind. How many dead? We don't have final numbers. At least 2 million. Maybe more. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them, they were different. The young aide took an involuntary step backward without understanding why. "Get me a secure channel to Earth, priority 1, and find out when the Council can convene an emergency session." The emergency session took 4 days to organize. 4 days while Sarah Chen received reports of mass graves and refugee camps on New Eden. 4 days while she learned that the Dromath had taken exactly 200,000 humans as prisoners, transported to unknown locations for what their official statement called labor allocation. 4 days while something continued to wake inside her and inside every human who heard the news. When the Council finally gathered, the chamber was full. Word had spread and everyone wanted to see how the peaceful humans would respond to their first real test. The Dromath representative spoke first. Ambassador Crixtal was enormous even for his species, and he made no effort to hide his contempt as he addressed the chamber. The Syndicate exercised its rights under Galactic law. The territory known as New Eden was improperly surveyed during humanity's expansion period. Our analysis shows that it falls within traditional Dromath sphere of influence. We have corrected this error. The matter is closed. Sarah stood at her platform and let the silence stretch. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. "You killed 2 million people," she said quietly. "You took 200,000 prisoners. You call this correcting an error?" Crixtal clicked his mandibles in what passed for a Dromath smile. "Regrettable casualties during a legitimate territorial action. The Syndicate is prepared to offer alternative settlement rights in the outer systems as compensation." "We don't want compensation. We want our people back. We want justice for the dead." "Then you want something the Syndicate cannot provide." Crixtal turned to address the full council. "We call for a vote to recognize the New Eden action as a legitimate territorial dispute, resolution under standard protocols." Sarah watched the votes come in. The Velthari supported the Dromath as she had known they would. The two powers had agreements that went back centuries. The Crystalline Collective voted with them, probably because the alternative would disrupt their carefully calculated balance of power. Smaller species followed, some out of fear, some out of political calculation. The final tally was 287 to 113. The New Eden Massacre, as humanity would call it forever after, was officially declared a territorial dispute. Humanity was advised to accept the compensation and move forward. Sarah Chen looked at the numbers on her display and felt the last thread of restraint snap somewhere deep inside her. "I would like to make a statement," she said. The council fell silent. There was something in her voice that had not been there before. 300 years ago, humanity joined this council. We came in peace. We offered friendship. We asked only for a fair place among the stars. She paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives of 400 species. "We made ourselves small. We made ourselves quiet. We made ourselves safe, and you took that as weakness." Crixtal laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "The human speaks of strength. Your species has no fleet, no weapons, no warriors. You are traitors and teachers. What will you do? Lecture us to death?" Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You are right, Ambassador. We chose to be peaceful. We chose to put away our weapons and our warriors. We chose to be something better than what we were." She let the words hang in the air. But choices can be unmade. She touched a control on her platform, and humanity's official response appeared on every display in the chamber. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws all diplomatic personnel from council space. All trade agreements are suspended pending review. All human citizens in non-human territories are advised to return home within 30 days. Murmurs filled the chamber. Several ambassadors began shouting questions. Sarah ignored them all. "You have made a mistake you do not yet understand. You woke something that we spent 3 centuries trying to keep asleep. We chose to be peaceful." Her eyes found Crixtal across the vast chamber. "We were not made that way." She stepped down from her platform and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted before her without conscious thought, something in their ancient instincts recognizing what their modern minds could not name. Behind her, Crixtal called out mockingly, "And what will you do, human? What can your little species possibly do against the Syndicate?" Sarah stopped at the door. She did not turn around. "You took our children, Ambassador. You will learn what that means." She walked out of the chamber, and the doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Across human space, in facilities that had been dormant for generations, lights began to flicker on. Automated systems that had been running maintenance protocols for 200 years received new instructions. Vaults that had not been opened since before the oldest living human was born began their unlocking sequences. On Earth, in a building that appeared on no official records, a group of men and women gathered around a table. They wore no uniforms, but they carried themselves like soldiers. They had been waiting, as their parents had waited, and their grandparents before them. The message from Ambassador Chen arrived with a single code word. The eldest among them, a woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, read the word aloud. Awaken! She looked around the table at the others. Send word to all cells. Begin Protocol Omega. The hunt starts now. Deep in humanity's genetic archives, files that had been sealed since the first generation of modifications were accessed for the first time. Files labeled Ancestral Combat Templates. Files containing the genetic codes of humanity's most dangerous ancestors. The ones who had painted themselves in blood and screamed at the sky. The ones who had followed wounded prey for days until it collapsed. The ones who had eaten the hearts of their enemies to gain their strength. Humanity had buried these files because they were afraid of what they represented. Now they needed them again. The predator was waking up, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Admiral Crexton walked through the prisoner camp with the satisfaction of a hunter surveying captured prey. The facility had been constructed quickly on one of the Syndicate's industrial moons. Row after row of simple shelters stretched toward the horizon, each one containing humans who would soon learn their place in the Dromath order. He had commanded the New Eden assault personally. 3 cities reduced to glass in less than an hour, 2 million dead before most of them even knew what was happening, and now 200,000 prisoners who would serve the Syndicate for the rest of their lives. It had been easy, almost disappointingly so. Crexton stopped to observe a group of prisoners gathered near one of the water distribution points. They looked up as his shadow fell over them, but something was wrong. They did not cower. They did not beg. They simply watched him with calm, steady eyes. One of them, a young female, actually smiled. Crexton felt a strange discomfort in his thorax, an instinct he could not name. He pushed it aside and continued his inspection. The guards reported no significant problems. The humans were compliant, accepting their food rations and shelter assignments without protest. They followed orders and caused no trouble. By all measures, they were the perfect prisoners. So why did Crexton feel like something was wrong? He found his answer 3 days later, when he began his interrogation program. The first subject was an elderly human male. Records identified him as Dr. Marcus Webb, a historian from one of New Eden's universities. Crexton had chosen him specifically. Historians knew things. They could reveal military secrets, defense protocols, the location of hidden assets. The interrogation room was designed to intimidate. Harsh lights, cold metal surfaces, and Crexton himself looming over the small human chair. He had broken hundreds of prisoners from dozens of species in rooms like this. Dr. Webb, Crexton began, his mandibles clicking with each word. You will tell me everything about humanity's military capabilities. The old man looked up at him without fear. I would be happy to discuss human history with you, Admiral, in exchange for better treatment of the children in this camp. Crexton was momentarily surprised. Bargaining? In an interrogation? You are not in a position to make demands. I am not making demands. I am offering a trade. Information for kindness. A very human arrangement. Dr. Webb smiled gently. Besides, I think you might find our history quite educational. Against his better judgment, Crexton agreed. The children were moved to better shelters with improved rations. In exchange, Dr. Webb began his lessons. You want to know about human military capability, the old historian said during their second session. But first, you must understand what humans are. What we were before we chose to become something else. Crexton settled into his chair. He expected propaganda, exaggeration, the desperate lies of a conquered people. What he got was something else entirely. Let me tell you about the World Wars, Dr. Webb said. These were conflicts fought on our home planet before we reached the stars. The first one killed approximately 20 million people. The second killed approximately 70 million. Crexton's antennae twitched. You fought wars that killed millions of your own species? On a single planet? Oh, yes. We were quite efficient at killing each other. In the Second War, one nation developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. They used 2 of these weapons on populated areas. Hundreds of thousands dead in seconds. You used weapons of mass destruction on civilian targets? We did, and then we built more of them. At the height of our weapons development, we had enough nuclear devices to destroy our entire planet several times over. Dr. Webb's voice remained calm, almost gentle. We lived for decades with the knowledge that we could end our own species at any moment. It shaped us in ways you cannot imagine. Crexton found himself leaning forward despite himself. This is madness. No rational species would develop such weapons. Ah, but we were not always rational. We were predators, Admiral. Apex predators who clawed our way to the top of our food chain through violence and cunning. We ate other animals. We ate each other, sometimes in desperate circumstances. We painted ourselves with blood and danced around fires celebrating our kills. The Admiral made a dismissive sound. Ancient history, primitive behavior. Is it? Dr. Webb's eyes met his. Let me tell you about persistence hunting. Humans are not particularly fast or strong compared to other Earth predators. Do you know how we caught our prey? We followed it. For hours, for days, we tracked wounded animals across entire continents, never stopping, never resting, until they simply collapsed from exhaustion. We were the monsters that never stopped coming. Something cold touched Crexton's thorax again, that same nameless instinct. You speak of the past, he said. Humanity is peaceful now. You have no warriors, no weapons. Dr. Webb smiled again, and this time there was something different in it, something old and patient. We chose to be peaceful, Admiral. We made that choice deliberately, consciously, after we saw what we were capable of. We modified our genetics to reduce aggression. We buried our weapons and forgot our warrior traditions. We became traders and teachers because we were afraid of what we might become if we remained what we were. He leaned forward slightly. But the choice can be unmade. The modifications can be reversed. The weapons still exist, locked away in vaults that your intelligence services have never detected. And somewhere in the back of every human mind, the predator still sleeps. Crexton stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. Enough! This is propaganda. Fairy tales to frighten children. Perhaps, Dr. Webb said calmly, but I would suggest you look at your guards, Admiral. Notice how nervous they have become around the prisoners. Notice how they avoid eye contact. Their instincts are trying to tell them something their conscious minds cannot accept. The Admiral stormed out of the room, but that night he could not sleep. Far from the prison moon, in the heart of human space, the transformation was already beginning. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood in a medical facility that had not been used in 200 years. Around her, 300 volunteers lay in specialized pods, undergoing procedures that had been forbidden since the dawn of interstellar travel. The genetic modifications that had made humanity peaceful were being reversed. It was not a simple process. The aggression suppressors had been designed to be permanent, passed from generation to generation. Undoing them required rewriting fundamental genetic code, awakening sequences that had been deliberately silenced. The volunteers had been warned. They would not be the same people when they emerged. They would carry the weight of humanity's ancestral nature, the predator instincts that had been bred out of their species for 3 centuries. They had volunteered anyway. Elena watched the readouts on her display, hormone levels changing, neural pathways reforming, ancient genetic switches clicking back to their original positions. How do you feel? She asked one volunteer as he emerged from his pod. The man stretched, and there was something different in the way he moved. More fluid, more dangerous. I feel awake, he said. His eyes found hers, and she saw something looking out at her. Something old and patient and very, very hungry. For the first time in my life, I feel completely awake. Across human space, similar facilities were activating. Thousands of volunteers undergoing the same transformation. And alongside the genetic procedures, other preparations were underway. The ancient martial arts that had been preserved only in museums were being taught again. Not as cultural heritage, but as weapons training. Instructors who had learned from instructors, who had learned from the last generation of human warriors, passed down knowledge that had been dormant for 300 years. And the vaults were opening. Deep beneath the surface of a dozen moons and asteroids, storage facilities that did not appear on any official record revealed their contents. Ships that had been built and then hidden, weapons that made the galaxy's current arsenals look like children's toys, battle plans that had been refined and updated by each generation of secret keepers, waiting for the day they might be needed. The galaxy thought humanity had no military. In truth, humanity had built the largest hidden fleet in galactic history, then had the discipline to tell no one about it. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council noticed that humanity had gone quiet. Trade continued through automated systems, but human merchants no longer visited alien stations. Diplomatic channels remained open, but the embassies were empty. Human civilians throughout council space were politely, methodically returning home. When asked why, they gave the same answer. Family matters. Ambassador Crixtal dismissed the reports. Humans were scared, retreating to their little systems to hide. They would eventually accept reality and return to their proper place. He did not notice the Velthari ambassador's expression when she heard the human response. She was older than most realized, old enough to remember species that had given similar answers before they struck. She tried to warn the council. No one listened. On the edge of human space, a Dromath patrol ship completed its regular survey route. The commander was filing his standard report when his sensor officer made a strange sound. "Sir, I am detecting something unusual." "Define unusual." The sensor officer adjusted his display 3 times before answering. "Ships, sir, human ships, thousands of them." "Impossible. Humanity has no fleet of significance." "With respect, sir, my instruments disagree." The commander looked at the display himself. Then he looked again. Then he contacted Dromath High Command with an encrypted message that would change everything. "Priority alert. Human fleet detected at coordinates as follows. Estimated strength." He paused, unable to believe his own words. "Estimated strength exceeds 20,000 capital ships. They are not advancing. They are not retreating. They are waiting." He stared at the display, at the vast armada that had appeared from nowhere. "They are waiting, and they have been here for 6 weeks without anyone noticing." In the prison camp, Dr. Marcus Webb continued his history lessons. The guards no longer attended. Something about the old man's calm voice disturbed them too much. But Crexton kept returning. He told himself it was to gather intelligence. He knew in the part of his mind he refused to acknowledge that he was trying to understand something that frightened him. "The humans in this camp," he said one day, "they do not behave like prisoners. They help each other. They teach each other's children. They sing songs at night." "Why?" Dr. Webb nodded slowly. "Because they know something you do not, Admiral." "And what is that?" The old historian looked up at him with those calm, patient eyes. "Our family is coming. Your family is not." Crexton wanted to laugh, wanted to dismiss it as the desperate hope of a captured enemy. But somewhere in the stars, 20,000 human ships waited in perfect silence, and the Predator stirred in its long sleep, and the galaxy had no idea that everything was about to change. The message arrived at the Galactic Council on a standard diplomatic channel. Every species received it simultaneously, translated into their native languages with perfect precision. Ambassador Chen's face appeared on screens across 400 worlds. "This is a formal notice of predation," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "The Dromath Syndicate has taken what belongs to humanity. We will take it back. This is not a declaration of war. War implies 2 sides fighting. What is coming is not war." She paused to let the words settle. "We have given you 3 centuries of peace. We will give you 1 chance to return our people. After that, the hunt begins." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, diplomats and military commanders tried to understand what they had just heard. The term was unfamiliar. Notice of predation. It sounded ancient. It sounded hungry. The Dromath Syndicate responded with laughter and threats. They had 3,000 capital ships and the backing of 2 galactic superpowers. What could humanity possibly do against such strength? They received their answer within a week. The first attacks were not what anyone expected. There were no grand fleet battles, no planetary bombardments, no attempts to take territory. Instead, the humans struck at the systems that kept the Dromath military running. Supply convoys disappeared, not destroyed, simply gone. Ships that carried food and fuel and ammunition entered transit corridors and never emerged at their destinations. Dromath commanders waited for supplies that would never arrive. Communication relays went dark. One by one, the stations that connected Dromath systems to each other stopped responding. Military channels filled with static. Orders could not be transmitted. Reports could not be received. And then the sickness began. On 12 Dromath military installations, water supplies were contaminated with an agent that caused severe illness, but no deaths. Soldiers who drank the water spent weeks unable to fight, barely able to stand. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Combat readiness dropped to zero. Admiral Crexton reviewed the reports with growing unease. The humans were not trying to kill his forces. They were crippling them, weakening them, playing with them. He had seen predators hunt on his homeworld. They did not attack directly when prey was strong. They circled, they waited. They made small wounds and let blood loss and exhaustion do the real work. The humans were hunting his species the way his ancestors had been hunted by the great serpents of Dromath Prime. Worse, they were letting the Dromath know it. The broadcast began on the third week. Every Dromath ship, every military base, every communication device received the same transmission. Human voices speaking in perfectly accented Dromath language, reciting names. Just names. Thousands of names, read slowly and clearly, the names of every human killed in the New Eden massacre. The broadcast came at random intervals, impossible to predict or block. Dromath soldiers would be eating or sleeping or standing guard, and suddenly the names would begin. Hour after hour of names, each one a reminder of what had been done. Some soldiers reported hearing the names in their dreams. Other broadcasts followed, recordings of human children asking where their parents had gone, audio from the memorial services held on New Eden, eyewitness accounts of the attack, survivors describing what they had seen. The Dromath military began to fracture. Soldiers who had gloried in their victory started to question it. Some refused to participate in further operations. Others requested transfers to distant posts, anywhere the broadcast could not reach them. And still, the human fleet did not engage in direct combat. On one agricultural world, the population woke to find their reality changed overnight. Every defensive satellite had been disabled. Every military base was surrounded by human ground forces who had landed without triggering a single alarm. Human ships filled the sky, so many that they blocked out the sun. A single message appeared on every screen. "We could have killed you all in your sleep. Remember that we didn't. Now, let's talk about our people." The local commander surrendered within the hour, not because he had been defeated, but because he understood the message. The humans wanted him to know that his death had been their choice, and they had chosen differently. That commander was sent home with all his soldiers, unharmed. The humans took nothing from the planet except their own captives, a few hundred humans who had been taken in the initial raids. Word spread through the Dromath military. The humans were not conquering. They were not destroying. They were simply taking back what had been stolen and showing everyone that they could have done so much worse. It was the showing that broke morale more than any battle could have. The Galactic Council watched these events with growing alarm. The Velthari ambassador requested an emergency session to discuss the human situation. What she had to report made even the oldest council members uncomfortable. "My intelligence services have been studying human tactics," she said. "What they are doing has a name. They call it persistence doctrine." She activated a display showing human evolutionary history. On their homeworld, humans were not the fastest or strongest predators. They survived by tracking prey over long distances, following wounded animals for days until exhaustion caused collapse. Their bodies evolved to run longer than any other creature. Their minds evolved to never give up, never forget, never stop pursuing what they had marked as prey. She looked around the chamber. They are applying this same strategy to the Dromath Syndicate. They are not trying to win quickly. They are bleeding the Syndicate slowly, cutting supply lines, disrupting communications, spreading fear. They will keep doing this until the Syndicate collapses from exhaustion. Ambassador Crixtal rose to respond. "The Syndicate does not collapse. We will crush these humans as we have crushed every enemy before them." "Will you?" The Velthari ambassador's scales shifted to a color that indicated deep concern. "My analysts estimate that the human campaign has cost them fewer than 100 casualties. The Syndicate has lost 12,000 soldiers to illness alone. Your military production has dropped 40% due to supply disruptions." And the humans have not yet committed their main fleet to battle. Then we will force them to fight. We will strike at their homeworlds. We will show them what Dramath strength means. The Velthari ambassador said nothing. She had given her warning. What came next was not her responsibility. In the prison camp on the Dromath moon, something had changed among the human captives. The guards noticed it but could not explain what was different. The prisoners still followed orders, still accepted their rations, still caused no trouble. But they moved differently now. They stood straighter. They met the guards' eyes without looking away. And sometimes, when the guards were not watching directly, the prisoners smiled at each other with expressions that made Dromath instincts scream warnings. Dr. Marcus Webb continued his history lessons with Admiral Crexton, who had become almost obsessed with understanding his enemy. "You said humans were persistence hunters," Crexton said. "You followed prey until it collapsed. But surely this strategy has limits. Surely prey sometimes escaped." Dr. Webb nodded thoughtfully. "Rarely, but yes. Sometimes prey found shelter we could not breach. Sometimes they ran in directions we could not follow. When that happened, we did not give up." "What did you do?" "We waited. We remembered where the prey had gone. We passed that memory to our children, and they passed it to their children. Human tribal legends contain stories of hunts that lasted generations, prey that thought it had escaped only to be found by hunters who had inherited the grudge." Crexton felt the cold touch in his thorax again. "You are saying humans never stop hunting. I am saying that humans never forget, Admiral. Never forgive. Never truly give up." The old historian's voice was soft, almost kind. "Your people took our children. You killed 2 million of our people. Do you think we will ever stop coming for you? Do you think your grandchildren will be safe?" The Admiral stood abruptly. "This is psychological manipulation. You are trying to frighten me." "No, Admiral, I am trying to prepare you." Dr. Webb's eyes were gentle and terrible. "What is coming cannot be stopped by force or by politics. The hunt has begun. It will not end until we have what we came for." Outside in the prison yard, an elderly woman was teaching a group of children a song. It was an old song, older than space travel, older than written history. A song that human hunters had sung around fires while they waited for wounded prey to weaken. The words were in a language the Dromath could not translate, but the melody carried across the compound, and every human who heard it knew what it meant. Family was coming, and the Dromath had no idea that the real hunt had not yet started. On the edge of Dromath space, the human fleet waited in perfect formation. 20,000 ships, crewed by soldiers whose genetic modifications had restored the predator instincts their ancestors had buried. They had spent 3 weeks demonstrating what they could do. Now it was time to show what they would do. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the human flagship and reviewed the final tactical plans. His eyes were different than they had been 6 months ago. Something old looked out of them now, something that remembered what it meant to hunt. "All units report ready," his executive officer announced. Okonkwo nodded. "Begin Phase 2. The Dromath want a battle. Let's give them one they'll never forget." The fleet began to move, and across the galaxy, prey realized too late that the hunters had only been playing with them. The real hunt was finally beginning. The Dromath High Command met in their Grand War Chamber, a space designed to inspire confidence and project power. Holograms of 3,000 capital ships rotated above the central table, representing the greatest military force in the sector. Admiral Crexton stood among the other senior commanders, waiting for the Supreme Marshal to speak. "Enough games," the Supreme Marshal declared, his massive form dominating the room. "The humans have spent weeks hiding in shadows, striking at convoys and outposts. They think this will break us. They are wrong." He activated a tactical display showing human space. "We will take our entire war fleet into their territory. We will burn their colonies one by one until they surrender our prisoners and beg for mercy. They cannot hide from us when we bring the fight to their home." The commanders clicked their mandibles in approval. This was proper warfare, direct confrontation, strength against strength. Only Crexton remained silent. He had spent too many hours listening to Dr. Webb's history lessons. He had heard too much about human patience, human memory, human persistence. Supreme Marshal, he said carefully, I would suggest caution. The humans have shown capabilities we did not anticipate. Perhaps we should reconsider. The Supreme Marshal turned his massive head toward Crexton. You question our strength? You who led the glorious assault on New Eden? I question nothing about our strength. I question whether strength is what this situation requires. The situation requires overwhelming force, applied without mercy. That is the Dromath way. It has always been the Dromath way. The Supreme Marshal dismissed further discussion with a wave of one armored arm. We launch in 3 cycles. All commanders to your ships. Crexton returned to his flagship with a feeling of dread he could not shake. He had seen the human fleet waiting at their border, 20,000 ships appearing from nowhere. If the humans had hidden that much firepower, what else might they be hiding? The Dromath war fleet assembled in formation, 3,000 ships arranged in precise attack columns. It was the largest military operation in Dromath history. When they departed for human space, sensor arrays across the galaxy tracked their movement. The journey took 4 days. 4 days of building anticipation, of eager warriors preparing for glorious combat. 4 days of Crexton studying Dr. Webb's information and finding nothing that made him feel better. When they entered human space, they found nothing. No defenders, no resistance, no sign of the vast fleet that had been detected weeks earlier. The human colonies they passed were evacuated. Cities stood empty. Their populations vanished. Industrial facilities had been stripped and abandoned. It was as if humanity had simply disappeared. They run from us, the Supreme Marshal announced triumphantly. As all prey runs from superior predators, press forward to Earth itself. We will finish this war at the source. The fleet advanced deeper into human territory. Still no resistance. Still no sign of the enemy. Crexton felt his unease growing with every passing hour. This was wrong. The humans had not run from their attacks before. They had not hidden when their convoys were raided or their communications disrupted. Why would they run now? The answer came when they were 3 days from Earth. Supreme Marshal. The sensor officer's voice was strange, pitched high with something that might have been fear. Multiple contacts emerging from concealment. Thousands of them. They are all around us. The tactical display exploded with new signatures. From hollowed asteroids, from ships disguised as civilian transports, from positions hidden in the debris fields that humans had said were navigation hazards. The human fleet materialized around the Dromath Armada like wolves appearing from fog. Crexton counted the contacts on his own display. 20,000 ships, as the original report had said. But they were not in one location. They were everywhere. They had let the Dromath fleet sail into a trap that had been prepared long before the war began. Admiral James Okonkwo's face appeared on every Dromath communication screen. Supreme Marshal of the Dromath Syndicate, he said calmly. I am Admiral Okonkwo, commanding the Human Defense Force. Your fleet is surrounded. Your escape routes are blocked. Your supply lines are cut. His eyes were strange, Crexton noticed. Something looked out of them that had not looked out of human eyes before. Something old and patient and utterly without mercy. I am offering you one opportunity to surrender. Release the human prisoners in your custody. Return to Dromath space. Accept responsibility for the New Eden massacre. In exchange, your fleet will be allowed to leave. The Supreme Marshal responded with the Dromath equivalent of laughter. You think your numbers frighten us? We are warriors born. You are traitors and teachers who have forgotten what battle means. We will crush your pathetic fleet and take your worlds as trophies. I see. Admiral Okonkwo nodded slowly. Then you have made your choice. The battle began. What followed would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The Dromath had numbers on their side, at least in terms of large capital ships. They had warriors trained from birth for combat. They had technology that had proven superior to most galactic civilizations. None of it mattered. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like pack hunters, coordinating across vast distances with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Groups of smaller human ships would engage a Dromath capital vessel, drawing its fire and attention, while other groups circled around to strike at weak points. They used weapons the galaxy had never seen, devices that disabled rather than destroyed, shutting down Dromath systems without killing the crews inside. Missiles that deployed expanding nets of energy that trapped ships like insects in webs. Beam weapons that could slice through armor plating like it was not there. But it was not just the weapons that made the difference. It was the way the humans used them. They did not fight to kill when they could fight to disable. They did not destroy when they could capture. Ship after ship in the Dromath fleet found itself suddenly powerless, drifting in space while human boarding parties approached. The humans took prisoners. They saved crews from damaged vessels. They rendered medical aid to wounded Dromath, who had been trying to kill them moments before. And somehow this made them more terrifying, not less. They are hurting us, Crexton realized as he watched the tactical display. Like prey, they are pushing us towards specific locations. He was right. The human fleet was not trying to destroy the Dromath armada. It was guiding it, using precision strikes to force ships into tighter and tighter formations, cutting off escape routes one by one. When the Dromath fleet was finally compressed into a single cluster, the humans stopped firing. Admiral Okonkwo's face appeared again on every screen. Your fleet has been neutralized, he said. Of your 3,000 capital ships, approximately 2,400 are disabled or destroyed. Your Supreme Marshal's flagship has been captured. He is being treated according to the laws of war. He paused to let this information sink in. Human casualties in this engagement are 12 ships damaged, none destroyed. Your crew members who have been taken prisoner will be treated with dignity and returned to Dromath space when this conflict concludes. Crexton stared at the numbers. 12 ships damaged against 3,000. It was not possible. It could not be possible. You asked what we are, Okonkwo continued. We are what you made us. We spent 3 centuries being peaceful because we chose peace. You took our children. You killed our people. You woke something we had tried to bury. His eyes found the optical pickup, seeming to stare directly at every Dromath watching. We could destroy every surviving ship in your fleet in the next hour. We could glass every Dromath world the way you glassed our cities. We could hunt your species to extinction and sleep well, knowing we had removed a threat to our children. The silence stretched across the void between ships. We choose not to. This is not mercy. It is not weakness. It is a demonstration of what humans are when we control our nature instead of letting it control us. Admiral Okonkwo's expression did not change, but something in his voice softened slightly. The Dromath prisoners will be returned unharmed. Your Supreme Marshal will face trial for the New Eden massacre, but his people will not be punished for his decisions. We will rebuild what was destroyed, and if you choose differently in the future, if your syndicate learns that there are better ways to exist among the stars, humanity will be willing to forget. He looked directly into the recording device. But we will never forget what you did. We will never stop watching, and if you ever threaten our children again, we will come. Not as the peaceful traitors you have known, not as the teachers and diplomats who smiled at your insults. We will come as what we truly are. His final words were quiet and certain. We will come as predators, and nothing in this galaxy will stop us. The transmission ended. Across the battlefield, Dromath crews waited in disabled ships for human rescue teams to arrive. The greatest military power they had ever assembled had been broken in less than 4 hours. In the wreckage of the Supreme Marshal's flagship, Crexton was found unconscious but alive. When he woke in human custody, the first thing he saw was Dr. Marcus Webb standing beside his medical bed. You survived, the old historian said simply. I am glad. Crexton looked at him, remembering all the lessons, all the warnings he had failed to understand. You told me, he said weakly. You told me what would happen. Yes. Dr. Webb sat down beside the bed. But you had to see it for yourself. Your people had to see it. That is the only way anything changes. Why did they spare us? Why show mercy to enemies who showed no mercy? The old man was quiet for a long moment. Because that is what predators become when they evolve far enough. They learn that they do not need to kill everything they could kill. They learn that strength means having power and choosing when to use it. He smiled gently. Your people will understand this someday. We will help you understand if you let us. Crexton closed his eyes and tried to process everything that had happened. The humans had won. More than that, they had proven that their victory was never in doubt. They had spent 300 years hiding the truth of what they were, and they were offering the Dromath a chance to become something better. Somewhere in the core of his being, something shifted. It was not submission. It was not fear. It was the first glimmer of something he had never felt before. Respect. The Galactic Council chamber had not been this crowded in 300 years. Every species had sent additional observers. The floating lights that represented different worlds pressed close together, creating a kaleidoscope of color that shifted with barely contained tension. The Dromath Syndicate's military was broken. Their supreme marshal awaited trial in human custody, and somewhere in the vast reaches of space, the human fleet waited in perfect formation, ready to continue what they had started. The question that filled the chamber was simple. What would the humans do now? Ambassador Sarah Chen entered through the main doors with a delegation that made everyone uncomfortable. Dr. Marcus Webb walked beside her, along with several other humans who had been prisoners on Dromath worlds. They had been offered new clothes, medical treatment, time to recover from their ordeal. They had chosen to come here first. Chen took her position at the human platform and surveyed the assembled representatives. She saw fear in most of them. Fear of what humanity had revealed itself to be. Fear of what might happen if the Predator decided that the Dromath were not the only ones who deserved punishment. Some of those fears were justified. The Velthari and the Crystalline Collective had voted to support the Dromath. They had enabled the massacre on New Eden with their political convenience. Chen could have demanded justice. The human fleet could have turned its attention to their systems next. It would have been easy. It would have been satisfying. It would have been exactly what the Predator instincts demanded. Distinguished representatives, she began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. I am here to discuss the future, not the past. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was not what anyone had expected. The Dromath Syndicate attacked our world. They killed our people. They took our children. Chen's voice remained steady. We have demonstrated that we could destroy them in response. We could turn their civilization to ash and remove them from the galactic community forever. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. We choose not to. The Velthari ambassador rose partially from her seat. You choose not to? After what was done to you? I do not understand. No, Chen agreed. You do not. That is why I am here to explain. She touched a control and images appeared throughout the chamber. Images of human history, of war and violence, and the terrible things humans had done to each other before reaching the stars. This is what we were, Chen said. Predators, hunters, creatures who killed each other by the millions and celebrated our victories in blood. We built weapons that could end our own species. We fought wars over territory, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. The images shifted. The violence faded into something else. Humans working together, building things, reaching toward the stars. And then we changed. Not because we were weak, not because we forgot what we were capable of. We changed because we understood that being the most dangerous creature in the room does not mean you have to prove it every day. She looked directly at the Velthari ambassador. 300 years ago, humanity chose peace. We modified ourselves, buried our weapons, made ourselves small and quiet. We did this not because we were afraid of you, but because we were afraid of ourselves. We knew what we could become if we let the Predator rule us. The chamber was completely silent now. The Dromath attack woke something we had put to sleep. Our people called for vengeance. Every instinct we had buried demanded that we destroy those who had hurt us. Chen's voice softened slightly. We could have given in to those instincts. We could have become what the galaxy always feared we might be. She straightened, and something changed in her bearing. Not aggression, something stronger. Instead, we choose to be what we aspired to be. We choose restraint. We choose mercy. Not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to make that choice even when everything in us screams for blood. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to see a Dromath representative approaching the center of the floor. Not Ambassador Crickstall, who had died in the battle. Someone younger, wearing the simple robes of a civil administrator rather than military decorations. "I am Vreknath," she said. "I speak for what remains of the Dromath government. The military leadership that ordered the New Eden attack has been removed from power. We accept full responsibility for what was done." She looked at Ambassador Chen with compound eyes that somehow conveyed emotion. "We do not understand what you have done. We attacked you and you defeated us without destroying us. You took our people prisoner and treated them with dignity. You could have taken everything we had, and instead you gave us a chance to survive." Vreknath turned to address the full council. "The Dromath have been conquerors since before we reached the stars. We believed that strength meant dominance, that power meant destruction. Humanity has shown us something different. They have shown us that true strength is having the power to destroy and choosing not to use it." She faced Chen again. "We wish to understand how this is possible. How does a predator species learn restraint? How do you control the instincts that define what you are?" Chen smiled, and for the first time since the war began, it reached her eyes. "You learn. Slowly, painfully, through centuries of mistakes and suffering. You learn that the hunt does not always have to end in death. You learn that enemies can become allies, that fear can become respect, that the satisfaction of mercy lasts longer than the satisfaction of vengeance." She extended her hand toward Vreknath. "We will teach you if you are willing to learn." The Dromath representative looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then she reached out with one of her own limbs and completed the gesture. The council erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Such a thing had never happened. The Dromath did not make peace with species they had attacked. They certainly did not accept the leadership of those species. But something fundamental had changed, not just in the Dromath, in the entire galaxy. When the chaos finally settled, Chen presented humanity's proposals. They were not demands, not ultimatums. They were suggestions for how the Galactic Council could become something better than it had been. A restructuring of the voting system so that powerful blocs could not simply ignore smaller species. The establishment of a genuine galactic court with authority to enforce decisions. Protections for civilian populations that would apply to all member species, not just the politically convenient ones. The votes were not unanimous, but they passed. The Velthari and crystalline delegations, watching humanity choose diplomacy over destruction, found themselves unable to oppose reforms that so obviously served the greater good. 10 years passed. New Eden had been rebuilt. The memorial gardens where 2 million people had died were now places of quiet reflection, tended by both humans and Dromath groundskeepers working side by side. In one of these gardens, a group of children played together, human children and Dromath children, running and laughing and completely unaware of the history that had brought their species to this moment. An elderly man sat on a bench nearby, watching them with contentment. Dr. Marcus Webb had retired from university life after the war. He spent most of his time now in these gardens, telling stories to whoever wanted to listen. A figure approached and sat down beside him. Crexthan, once admiral of the Dromath fleet, now ambassador for Dromath human relations. The years had changed him. The rigid military bearing had softened into something more thoughtful. "I still have nightmares sometimes," Crexton said quietly, "about the battle, about what could have happened." "What kind of nightmares?" "Different ones now." Crexton watched the children play. "I dream about what would have happened if humanity had not offered mercy. If they had destroyed us as we would have destroyed them." Webb nodded slowly. "The predator instinct, fully unleashed. We came very close to that, you know. Closer than most humans want to admit." "What stopped you?" The old historian was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "We remembered why we put the predator to sleep in the first place. Not because we were afraid of other species, because we were afraid of who we would become if we let it rule us." He smiled gently. "The greatest victory is not defeating your enemies. It is becoming something that does not need enemies." A young human girl ran up to them, breathless and laughing. "Dr. Webb, tell us a story." Behind her, a young Dromath child clicked shyly, mandibles expressing the same request in a different language. Webb stood slowly, his old bones protesting. "What kind of story would you like?" "A story about heroes," the girl said. "A story about hunters," the Dromath child added. Webb smiled at both of them. "I will tell you about hunters who became heroes, about predators who learned that the greatest hunt is the hunt for something better." He led the children to a shaded area where others were gathering. Crexthon watched them go, thinking about everything that had changed. Humanity's predator instinct had awakened. The galaxy had expected destruction, conquest, the inevitable violence of a species that had suppressed its nature for too long. Instead, humanity had shown that awakening could mean something else entirely. The predator had looked at what it could do, at the blood it could spill, and the worlds it could burn, and had made a choice. Not weakness, not mercy for its own sake. Something harder, something that required more strength than any battle. The choice to be better than what instinct demanded. In the garden, children of two species that had tried to destroy each other sat together and listened to stories of a future they would build together. Somewhere above them, ships from 100 worlds traveled through space that had once been divided by fear and suspicion. The hunt was over. Something new had begun. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the window of her office on Earth, looking out at a sky that held more promise than it had in centuries. She had received word that morning that the Dromath delegation would be proposing an unprecedented joint exploration initiative. Human and Dromath crews working together to chart unknown regions of the galaxy. She smiled, remembering her own words from 10 years ago. The predator had awakened, and the galaxy had learned that the most terrifying thing about humans was not their capacity for violence. It was their capacity to choose, every single time, not to use it. That was the real victory. That was what made humanity dangerous in ways that could not be measured in ships and weapons. They had proven that the predator could be more than instinct, that the hunt could end in something other than death. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever.